Hi, welcome. I'm Bonnie Bradley, Associate Director here at Bethany Arts Community. Bethany's mission is to create a space and environment where many forms of art can be learned, produced, and flourish. A space where artists of all ages and levels of experience are welcome to explore and create art for the community to experience and engage with while enhancing their perception and perspective of the world. We offer short-term residencies, attracting artists at different stages of their careers from around the world for the development of both new works and works in progress. We welcome artists working across most disciplines, including visual arts in any medium, writers, playwrights, choreographers, musicians, composers, performance artists, filmmakers, lighting and projection, costume, and sound engineers. Our full residency is designed to provide a collective environment for artists of all disciplines to engage in meaningful interactions with their peers while pursuing individual group projects. With us today, we have Santina Amato. Santina Amato is a Brooklyn-based multidisciplinary artist who was born in Australia to Italian immigrants. Her work incorporates photography, sculpture, site-specific installations, performance, and painting using ephemeral domestic materials such as bread dough, fresh fruit and vegetables, and bed sheets to create work that seem familiar yet uncannily disassociated from their original context and use. She is a graduate of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and has held the position of artist in resident at MoCA, Tuscan in Arizona, Mass MoCA in Massachusetts, Crosstown Arts in Memphis, and Char North in Pine Plains, New York. Amato has exhibited her work both nationally and internationally and has been supported by the Illinois Arts Council Agency, the City of Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs, and Special Events, and Australian Council of the Arts. So at this time, you ready, Santina, to share
Yes.
the process?
Yes.
Take it away.
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks to Bethany for inviting me for this amazing opportunity. I'm actually going to start with a presentation of my work to date and how some of these works have fed into what I've actually created in the last week and a half here at Bethany. So just bear with me while I do this share screen thing. Okay. So I've chosen this series of works because it does kind of relate to what I've done here at Bethany. This is a work that I did in 2018 that was supported by the Illinois Arts Council Agency. I created these sculptures out of ceramics, and they were this idea of a vessel. So I use bread dough in my work. For those of you that don't know my work, a lot of it. And this particular exhibition was my first solo exhibition in the US. And so I created these vessels and I didn't want them to sit on plinth. So I wanted them to have that reference back to the domestic. And so I purchased these furniture from thrift stores around Chicago where I was living at the time. And then these ceramic vessels became like appendages or extensions of these kind of disused furniture that once lived within an environment and was once upon a time loved. This is just a close-up of one of the works. So, they're glazed on the inside, they're unglazed on the outside. The idea you'll see coming up was to fill them up with bread dough and allow them to perform for the audience. And I won't mention what happens after that, but just at this point here, it's just there is a particular reason for the surfaces to be glazed on the inside and unglazed on the outside, which I'll mention later. So these are just images from the performance on opening night. So I had me and 3 of my friends, women, come together and we made, I think it was about 50 pounds of bread dough on site. This is something that was new to my work. I'd always made the bread dough kind of like behind closed doors, and then allowed the bread dough to kind of perform for the public, and sort of removing that labor process of the work, to sort of have the audience really think about the dough being kind of an extension of ourselves that is performing for the audience. But, you know, this bit here, the making of the dough, seemed to intrigue a lot of people. So we decided to do this on opening night. And so these are just like, you know, iPhone camera shots of the evening where the dough was, you know, obviously rising because there's yeast in there. And so it sort of like transformed these surfaces, these ceramic surfaces, and, you know, momentarily, because obviously it's not a material that is as, you know, like long lasting as ceramics. So this is kind of like where this idea of using ephemeral materials in my work sort of started coming into play, and really enjoying this process of like this entity, I suppose, kind of like consuming our space, but only for a very small amount of time in context to the to life, right? And so this is 5 weeks later after the exhibition. So during the time of that 5 weeks of the exhibition, I would come in with someone. I would invite another woman to come in with me, and we would make some dough. This was during opening hours. So you may or may not have caught us coming in and doing this. And so they were at different stages of decay. And of course, by the end of the 5 weeks, as you can imagine, the smell and the stench of yeast is like, you know, it's pretty gross. And then of course the flies came into it because the space was it wasn't climate controlled. So that all became part of the work as well. I really loved this, you know, this idea of like in death, there's life that's been created. So I'm gonna play, this is a time lapse, a short time lapse video, and also references kind of like what I'm doing here now in terms of like, you know, just the shape that's kind of like going on here. This is one of the first works I did using dough in my work. And, you know, like I was kind of intent on kind of creating my weight in dough, which had a history behind it. And so what I did was I set up these cameras in the space, and then I decided to like film myself making the bread dough. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the bread dough at the end of this kind of performance, because for me, it was about watching the body kind of like battling this you know, doppelganger, I suppose, that was in another material. But then once I actually, you know, I spent about an hour kind of making my own body weight in dough. I was so exhausted, and I said to the guy who was behind the camera, I said, you know what, I'm just going to lie down. I'm just going to let this thing do its thing. And it ended up consuming me, as you can see in the last kind of images. Like my left eye was consumed, my left nostril was consumed, my right nostril was about to be consumed. So that's why I ended the filming. And so this kind of like brought up all sorts of like questions about, you know, like, because I didn't want it specifically to be about me, the artist, and my body in space and stuff. So I started this series, which is what I've been probably known for in my practice. And it's an ongoing series, but of course it requires a team. So it's like I did a call out for women to write to me and tell me why they want their portrait done with their weight in bread dough. And so then I selected a number of artists, because I got this grant to be able to pay a team to come in. And so then we entered these spaces of these personal spaces of these the women that were selected, and we made their weight in dough on site. So this is Angelique's bedroom. And so we made the dough in her kitchen, and then we dragged this like big, huge mass that we made and sort of like dumped it on her. And then we just kind of like recorded what was happening in that sort of like hour and a half as it kind of like, you know, rose and slid off her and then started consuming her domestic space, and her body became one with this kind of like, you know, this mass. You know, that, yeah. So, this is me in Crosstown Arts in Memphis. Residences for me are really important part, like it's an important part of my practice. I realized that it's like meeting new people, you know, having discussions about work, possibilities. A new environment is really important for me because it like allows me to kind of like think about other things that I probably wouldn't have thought about. So this is a performance that I did a call out for and asked 11 women, including myself, to come join me and make 900 pounds of bread dough. Like such a ridiculous like gesture. And I was surprised at how many women were really super excited about joining me on this. So this is a performance in one of Crosstown's spaces. And these are just some images of the performance. And it, you know, it was ridiculous, right? It was like, how the fuck are we gonna make this? And of course it's all feed in. It was just like, there was so much, we were laughing and giggling, and it was, you know, it was just crazy. it was fun, right? And then afterwards I said to the girls, like, let's just lay in it and just let it consume our bodies. So this is, I did say to him, don't put, like, make sure your head is up away from it. Don't sort of lie on it. But some girls, as you can see, actually were lying sideways. And of course they got consumed and they actually had to leave the installation. And so there was only 4 of us that were left, and we actually had to stop because it started to get really cold. Like the cold of the dough was warm as it was rising and sort of reacting. And then once that sort of like, you know, started to get to its peak, like the cold of the cement started coming through and we were all shivering. So we had to end it. And these are just like iPhone photos that people sent me afterwards of the performance. And, you know, it's kind of so much in that work, so much in the work. And the reason why I kind of brought this work up is because I started, when I went to Crosstown, I had just done like worked with ceramics, and I bought this really amazing book that was the history of mankind and clay. And I was really kind of like interested in like, you know, connecting with clay and, you know, understanding its history and, you know, the domestic history of clay and also the commercial history. And within the first few pages of this book, it said that like wet clay can be, you know, recycled like over and over again, right? So, you know, you make something, it dries, it adds water to it, reconstitute it, then you can break it down and then reuse the clay over and over again. But once it's fired, it actually lives, exists forever and ever and ever. And I know it's kind of like one of those things, of course, Santina, like fired clay, we've got like, you know, ancient pots from like ancient Egypt or whatever. But it was just this kind of like epiphany moment of going, oh, wow, like I can't make artwork that like exists forever and ever. Like I just can't, that responsibility seems like too much, you know, with, you know, I've always been concerned about the environment and all that kind of stuff. And it just seemed like more stuff in the world just kind of like felt really overwhelming and consuming. And so then I started, I joined up with the University of Memphis, the ceramics department there, and asked if they would give me some clay. So this is clay that the students actually made. And then I created these kind of sculptures, ephemeral sculptures. And I set them up in my studio, and then I let them sort of dry out and mold and, you know, turn basically like this. This was another one that I'd done, which was a bit more performative because I did add the dough to it. And then eventually it sort of dried out like this. The great thing about this sculpture, which really kind of like excited me, was that at the end of my residency, I was there for 3 months, this clay went back to where it started from. So the students took back the clay and then they made their like pots and vases and whatever they made from it. So I really like this idea that this kind of like clay existed in a form, you know, that now it does exist in someone else's kind of interpretation and form. So I wanted to show this work. This is a work I did last year. The bed has had a very like strong influence in my work. And, you know, like I've always, you know, I've been thinking about the bed and what that is. And it's like, you know, the bed is, you know, we give birth on beds, we die on beds, we have sex on beds. When we're depressed, we stay in bed. Like, you know, the bed is like the stage for so many emotions and so many like markers in our lives. And this one here is a performance I did where I combined two childhood memories. The first was my mum, you know, she's an immigrant from Italy. She would make bread when we were kids, and she would like knead the dough and put it in a bowl and then take it into my bedroom, put it on my bed, cover it in blankets, and then tell us all to be quiet because the dough's sleeping, right? And then, you know, she'd close the door behind her, and, you know, we'll be all this like excitement because like the dough was sleeping. And then of course we'd go back in an hour and it was just like huge. And it was just such a, like, as a kid, it was like, wow, like, you know, giving life to something. It was really weird. And then there was this thing that was going to go into the oven and then, you know, like we were going to eat. It was just like this whole like thing for me as a kid. And the other memory that I combined with this was that my mum, when I was 5 or 6, she got word from Italy that her father had died. And in those days, the women in the families would wear all black as a sign of mourning. If it's your husband, you would wear black for the rest of your life. If it was a family member, like a parent or whatever, you'd wear black for a year. And I just remember my mum getting off the phone, being told that her father died, and then going into the kitchen and getting a big, huge pot and putting it on the stove and then throwing all her clothes in there. So she was actually dyeing them black. And it was just this really sort of like, for me, that was kind of like this first image of kind of death. Is this really abstract thing, because obviously I didn't know my grandfather because he was in Italy. And it's, to me, this image of like my mum putting her clothes in and then they're coming out black was just, you know, yeah, just this abstract. So I combined these two kind of like, these two images. The dress I'm actually wearing in this, I sourced, and it was from Etsy, and you know, like a little niche boutique-y kind of place making these gowns. They're birthing gowns, right? So they got the buttons on the back, and they're meant to be like, you know, if you want to look a bit pretty while you're giving birth instead of like the hospital gown. And I found it in black, and black, you know, in Italian culture, that's death, right? My mum to this day hates seeing me in black. She always says to me, you know, who died, you know? So this idea that there's this birthing gown that's in black was really resonated with me. So I bought the gown to wear. And so I made the dough, and this was a live performance. So there were people kind of like on this side of the camera. And then I carried like the dough onto the bed, and then I just allowed the dough to rise and sort of like consume the bed. And this image to me is just like, every time I see it, I'm just like, there's a part of me that's just like, oh my God, that is fucking amazing. Like, it's just like, that's my childhood kind of like dreams come true, you know? It's kind of weird. But anyway, so the bed. So earlier this year when lockdown happened, you know, of course I was like everyone else, what the fuck? And I started thinking about like, you know, intimacy during COVID, like what does that mean when you kind of like it means I can't kiss anyone. I can't kiss anyone, like, because that's where we get kind of COVID. And so this idea of using bed sheets was, for some reason, came up. And so I ended up going on eBay and ordering used bed sheets from across America. And then I started making these kind of things that I'm calling softies. Now I get that that's not my term. I started looking at, like, I really like watching videos of like stay-at-home mums kind of like making their crafty things. So I was looking at these videos of these mums making, you know, soft toys for their kids. And in that world, this kind of like term softie is used often. And I just think it's really funny, right? Flaccid penis, like, you know, it's kind of like got all these other kind of connotations to them. And so, what I noticed that they were doing was trying to get this like perfect kind of like soft toy, hiding seams, hiding you know, like joins, all of that kind of stuff. And that kind of like got me really frustrated. Like I just didn't, you know, like seams and joins and like there's scars, they're things that are like a part of our history, who makes us, like what makes us. And so I decided to like make them with the exposed seams. And this one here is actually made using 2 pillowcases. So I was working quite a while on this, and you know, I haven't completely disregarded it, but I've put it down for a little bit because I was kind of feeling like I got a little bit stuck. But I was using, these are natural materials too. Like I really like using natural materials. Again, going back to the environment and stuff, I just hate the idea of using plastic. So these are actually made using wool. I ordered some wool from Pennsylvania, and that's what these are stuffed with. The one on the right, that's kind of like towards the end where I was actually turning them inside out, and I was kind of like hiding the seam because I just really did want to see what would happen if like, and how, you know, compare and contrast and see where that would go. So now we're here at Bethany. Bethany, for those that haven't come, is an old missionary. You know, when I first got accepted into the program, I was super excited about being surrounded by like, you know, 20 artists, and then it was COVID, and then it's like, shit, you know, what's going to happen? What are you guys going to do? And right now there's only 4 of us. So this is, I should have actually asked, this is a huge space that can house a lot of people. There's lots and lots and lots of like bedrooms, off hallways, and it's been really strange meandering through this kind of like domestic space that's kind of empty. And I was given an apartment, which I'm gonna walk through with you guys. But I was given an apartment that had a kitchen. It's a disused kitchen. And I was told that I could use that as a studio space. And I love the idea of that. I had a studio down the hallway, but the idea of working within the domestic space really suited me. So I brought the sheets with me, and I knew I wanted to work with wax because I discovered I was looking at biodegradable materials when I was resident at Mocha Tucson, and I came across Beeswax Wraps, which is like a domestic product that you know, replaces cling wrap. And is something that's actually quite old in terms of materials. So it's basically 100% cotton that's like, you know, treated with wax and pine resin and jojoba oil. And so I did this whole thing en masse. It was a nightmare trying to work out the technique best to do it on such a large scale. And the interesting thing is, once I kind of like laid out the sheet like this and I spread the beeswax, to me it looked like what a lot of surfaces looked like when I was a kid. When my mum would make pasta, we would actually do this. We would lay like pasta out on the beds to dry, or out on the table to dry, you know, tablecloths and stuff. And so yeah, this is just a close-up of it. Yeah, and basically I just got an iron and just went right on it, and it was yeah, it was interesting. So this is me with like, the bottom sheet has way too much wax, and so that I've gotten the top sheet to put on top, and I'm like ironing every single last square inch of this thing. It was exhausting. And of course I was doing it on the ground, and after 5 days or whatever, I had enough, so I pulled up a table and started working on there. And you can see my, like, I'm a really messy artist when I work. So yeah. And this is just another view of me working on the table. So you can see like the sheer volume of that, like that sheet was quite a lot to sort of handle. And I just kind of pulled these off the internet. I was like, oh, you know, I just wanted to show you guys, like, this is something that I grew up with, like, you know, beds covered in pasta or tablecloths covered in pasta. So just so that you can see the relationship of how it sort of like then goes back to like, you know, everything sort of like circles around. So that's it in terms of the slideshow. So now I'm going to take you all around my studio space. I'm just going to be putting myself on mute, and then I'm going to get on the phone. Okay. So welcome to my house. That's been my house for the last 2 weeks. And so these are like, I kind of like created these sculptures thinking about the leftover, I'm going to try and move. Okay. These are kind of like leftover furniture pieces that were here in the space. So, you know, being a missionary, like, I don't know if you can see the detail here of, you know, that sort of like churchy kind of like aesthetic, which freaks me out all the time. So the material, unfortunately, like I'm still kind of like playing around with it. I really like that it's kind of transparent, but I'm having issues with it kind of like just staying in place. And I think it's just because it's quite warm in here. And then there's this one here in the kitchen. I don't know what to say about these, but like I said, I'm still playing around. I'm kind of liking the idea that there's, you know, the threads kind of like happening. Yeah, we're still got another day here. So a day is a long time in an artist studio. So I'm definitely going to be playing around a little bit more with these shapes and seeing what happens, what the possibilities are of this particular material. It's kind of quite lovely to touch. It's I don't know how to describe it, but there is something really kind of organic about it. And so I'm going to take you down the hallway. And this is work that I really, the great thing about Bethany is that there are these like little nooks and crannies that are just perfect for site-specific work. So I've really enjoyed this space here, and there are some other spaces as well, hallways, that I'm hoping to play around with. So that's it. I'm going to swap over to my computer. And there we have it. That's me.
Oh, thank you so much, Santina. That was very fascinating and interesting. And I'd like to know, does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like to ask a question? Any questions? Yeah, Santina, would you like to share about how your experience was being here?
I mean, it was very unusual because like I said, you know, during COVID, having 4 artists here, I'm used to being surrounded by quite a few artists. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, for me, having an unusual studio space is really inspiring. So I was really glad that when you showed me around that you said, this is your space and you can use the kitchen. Because that was like, yeah, I kind of, the white wall kind of like, you know, polished floorboard, polished concrete kind of like scenario for me is a little bit boring. Like I feel like you can make anything look really great in those kind of spaces. So the challenge of kind of like, you know, inserting something, you know, into a domestic space, into a space that is, you know, a livable space, excites me.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, well, if anybody does have any further questions, they can leave them in the comments section of the Facebook Live. I'd just like to note that our residency program is made possible with the generous support of the National Endowment of the Arts, New York State Council on the Arts, Arts Westchester, and donations from our community. Santina, thank you so much for giving us your time. We really—
All right, thank you.
Looking forward. Okay, have a great day.
Thanks, bye.